How to invent a religion.
I always knew you had to be willing to die to even do this job.
Can't stop what's coming. Executive orders.
The creation and the maintenance of a secret government within our government.
Is something wrong? With what? With anything?
I feel like you want to rip your face off.
There's something wrong with everything.
I was so spun.
What's the most you ever lost an acquaintance?
The law of the jungle, sir.
The most you ever lost an acquaintance?
You don't know what you're talking about. Good son. I said, you don't know what you're talking about.
Suppression of unrest and dissent. Domestic anti-terrorism.
I don't have some way to put it. That's the way it is.
All right, it's Tuesday. You know the ritual, Blackballed or Rollie Quaid, right here on revisionmedia.org. I got a very special guest tonight. He's a returning guest. I got James True. James, how you doing?
I'm awesome, Rollie. Good to be here. How you doing?
Man, it's great to hear your voice again. It seems like 2 weeks ago I was telling you I like to bring guests back, and little do I know, like it's been 6 weeks according to my calendar. Man, time flies.
Man, you ain't kidding. I feel that I'm surprised it's been 6 weeks. It literally feels like 4 days, maybe.
Maybe we walked through a distortion field, and now we're here at this moment together doing a show. It's great to have you back on.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And distortion fields are everywhere. Anytime I could start speaking slow.
Absolutely, and we got 5G, so distortion fields are real, people.
That's right.
Well, James, you just took a trip recently. Do you want to talk to the audience about where you've been?
I don't remember taking a trip. I've been on a trip of journeys, that's for sure. I've been really enthralled in writing and research lately. A lot of new stuff coming out, especially in my book, and some new thoughts I've been having about what I'm going to call it the Prana economy, the economy of life force, as it the life force economy that runs underneath all the social bullshit that you hear, like between two people. The actual energetic exchange that's happening beneath that. I've just been obsessed with that. That's part of why time moves so fast. You know, we start to gnaw on some truth, and next thing you know, it's like 3 weeks later. You know, and we're still chewing on it.
I thought I saw a picture of you in Taiwan with a picture of your book in front of his statue.
Isn't that awesome?
I thought that was
No, that's a selfie. That's a reader. One of my favorite things is seeing selfies of my book. That was a selfie all the way from Taiwan. Now I know why you're saying that. No, it's so that's just like the highlight of all I do is to open up my inbox and see a picture of my book in some place that I will never, I'll probably never be there myself. So.
Oh, okay. I definitely thought you've been to Asia before. I've been myself to Thailand and Japan and Russia.
Oh, cool. No, I've only been to Europe, and I've actually never. Feel like the furthest south I've ever been is like Belize or Costa Rica, whichever one's more south. So.
You said that you're opening up your own new economy. I'm really fascinated in that. Can we start the show off talking about that a little bit more? Because like our work and our labor is our life force. They say that, anything that we build, there's a certain pride. But I feel like as a society, we're drifting away from that. And I'm a millennial myself. And there was so much that happened while baby boomers were on the clock. For example, 9/11, the big economic crash. And there's a big push saying that we're lazy and no good. If you could turn on CNN, they're talking about Michael Rotondo, that this is the quintessential millennial. He lives in the basement, but they never say we can't afford to buy houses because this is the economy now.
Of course,
but,
yeah.
It's very interesting. Can you talk about this economic system that you have in mind a little bit? And maybe there's a little bit of liberation for people from my generation from it.
Sure. Earlier, when I said prana economy, I was actually literally talking about energy, the vampiric energy. It's not all vampiric; some of it's good. That's happening between people in their interactions. However, economy itself, the way that we can transition to a new life that's going to fix the excuses that each generation is going to continuously dump on the next one. Right now the millennials will get it, and then in the future whatever's next will get it. Before that it was the X generation. Whatever you want to call those things, it doesn't matter. We're building off the backs. The only reason why we're not drowning is because we're standing on the backs of the people that are dying in front of us, and each time it's just getting worse. The only way out of that is going to be through decentralization. And the only way we can decentralize is if everyone gains more sovereignty. Gaining sovereignty, though, requires a lot of brain calories. The brain burns more calories than anything else in your body. And the amount of calories it takes to really be sovereign is something that a 40-hour work week really just doesn't allow for. To really maintain your sovereignty, you're going to have to understand what the truth is, which means you're going to have to understand just how many lies surround you. It's so much more than you think. And to maintain to maintain a mental state of clarity where you are in your center requires constant calories, because you're constantly being bombarded by rewards and punishments that corral you into believing in dissonance, into believing into something else. Perfect example is I tweeted out today that under my control, we shrink wrap our firewood and put a barcode on it. And that's how our kids are learning to build fires now, is that they're going to a store and they're buying shrink wrap firewood. And that's their connection to so much of what nature is now. This is showing just how psychotic and insane the system is. And as it gets worse, it's requiring more and more calories be burnt in order to stand firm against it. So the solution to get out is actually the hardest thing possible, because it requires so much energy and focus, to maintain frame.
That's interesting what you just said about shrink wrapping timber. I live in Minnesota, and every single gas station, no matter what the season is, we have shrink wrap lumber at every single gas station. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing because everybody that migrated into Minnesota in the heyday were lumberjacks. Now,
yeah.
So, matter of fact, where Michelle Bachmann, famous politician, Republican, she's from a town that was a lumberjack town, and there's so many dips where the mudslides were because they were cutting so much lumber that literally there was like mudslides going on, and they're deep. You know what I mean? Like 50 feet, incline. As a matter of fact, there's certain cities that are all on an incline or decline, depending on which way you look at it. But there's a major generation gap in Minnesota where you have these yuckles, which is kind of like Midwest rednecks, kind of like the equivalent, but they're not rednecks though. They're kind of more like yokels. It's like to say Canadian terms, like, yeah. But people in the Twin Cities, they're so much different than the older generation. They're really passive-aggressive, very feminized, like the men. I was in a bar with a couple guys, and they were acknowledging that a female was pretty, which was the waitress. And I said, why don't you guys talk to her? She's paid to be nice to you anyways. You're halfway there. They're like, no, we can't talk to a girl.
Yeah.
These guys are almost 30.
Yeah.
And
they're ashamed. They don't want to screw up. They don't want to screw up. They already feel like that their existence is a virus in the world, and that their masculinity or their whiteness or their genitals or even their proclivities to genitals make them a degree of bad. And that degree is going to be less or more, but all of them are still bad. That's why the rainbow flag is a seating chart. It's a colorized seating chart that has a rank to it. Those kind of systems that's the only way you maintain control. You have to constrict the supply of oxygen in order to make oxygen look like a gift. If you can take the oxygen away and then slowly dole it out, you are now seen as an authority. You are now seen as someone who basically owns that person. That's the purpose of what we think is government right now. But when I say government, I'm not talking about DC. Government is actually media. Government is actually all the news and information you hear every day. That's the real government. That's the government that's actually doing its job when it comes to convincing you that it's sane to put in 40% of your life force into the District of Columbia, a place which isn't even a state. It's not even a state in our country. So the reason why those guys are so shy is because they're doing a good job being programmed. They've listened correctly, and they're just trying to survive. They just don't want to be bad. I mean, they already feel bad, but they don't want to be worse. That's their only goal, is to be less worse. And that's how this Prana economy works. Again, I'm saying Prana, if anyone can't hear me pronounce it right, but it's Prana, or life force, Prana. That's how the Prana economy works. It requires a funnel or a vortex where, several people are able to feed into a centralized system. And wherever there's a vortex, you're going to find a psychopath feeding on that vortex. No different than if you were in the ocean, and you were to find a hot plume coming up from the surface, you would find that a lot of creatures are there purely to feed on that vortex as it's happening. This is a fundamental part of nature, what's happening with us inside of this psychopathy.
And if you hate yourself, your skin color, and where you come from, you're in a state of moral paralysis where you cannot make good decisions whatsoever, and you're more inclined to allow yourself and your own family and the people around you to just die, to get herded into, let's say, FEMA camps.
Yeah, of course, that's why we shame the ego. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's amazing. You mentioned that the government, specifically, would you say the military, runs the media itself?
The media. It's weird, but the media is actually the government. Yeah. They have more control over your thoughts than anyone else, even the government. But like, you are more ruled by the media that you see than you are by the cops on the street. And the media that you see isn't even the television that you watch. It's all the people in your life, all the media that they see is also affecting you. There's no way that you can escape the media unless you are a hermit, unless you are completely living alone in isolation, which is fine, but now you're no longer a part of something. You are outside of the system. And that's why the media behaves the way it does. Just a few hours ago, I released a piece called CNN is the Government. And I just took one reporter's stories, her last 7 stories. And out of her 7 stories, this is someone that works in CNN. And everyone who reads CNN, in every airport, there's like a contract where they have to play CNN. And if you start to unwrap, well, why is that? First of all, this reporter has 31 likes for the last 7 stories she has. She has 31 likes. I mean, she's getting 0 impact or traffic. Now, I'm not trying to say that traffic is everything, but let's understand what a media economy means. If we really believe that we live in a capitalistic economy, that means businesses are competing for each other. understanding what media is understanding that media is the collecting of eyeballs in a jar. That's why media does it. It's trying to collect eyes. If it's not collecting eyes, that media company is not doing its job. And like anything else inside of the economy, it will fail. So if you look at CNN, one of their lead reporters out of 7 stories has 31 likes. If you do the math, and she's making $64,000 a year, before taxes, we're paying her $864 to write a story. And that story gets less than 31 likes. In fact, over the year, if you do the math, she's going to generate for CNN 854 likes, but they're going to pay out $64,000. That shows you that the media is not doing that to make money. CNN is not in that for the money. So what's next? Let's say CNN is in it for the truth. Let's say that that's why they're in it, that really Ted Turner is just so completely into the truth that he's willing to spend his billions, dumping that, whatever it takes to make sure the truth is out. The problem with that is that I analyzed this reporter's 7 stories, and she's talking about how Tennessee is wanting to pass a law to honor the KKK. That's how she phrases it. But if you look at the story, you actually see that no, Tennessee's trying to honor an American war veteran of the Civil War named Nathan Bedford Forrest. And Nathan Bedford Forrest was actually the very first white man to be asked to speak before the NAACP. They looked at him as the first civil rights leader. That's quite an honor to have, especially so long ago in the Civil War. But if you look at the CNN article, the headline doesn't say veteran, it doesn't say Civil War, it doesn't say civil rights leader, it says KKK, and it's a picture of a burning cross. That's what CNN is pushing out. So back to what I was saying before, that's number 2. They're not there for the truth. So if they're not there for readership, which we know, and they're not there for the truth, well, what else could they be there for? And what you're left with is manipulation. And if you start to do the math over how much it costs to do that manipulation, having the contract to be in every single airport and only generating 31 likes is going to be a very expensive endeavor. And wherever you can see a lot of money being spent, it's safe to say in a true economy that money's being spent because it's important. So CNN has an important job to manipulate things. It's very important to them to do so. They will lose millions and millions a year to do this. So then you start to unwrap, well, what are they doing? They're dividing the country. How? Well, this lady, out of the last 7 headlines she has, 5 of them are talking about race and how racist everyone is. Each one is uniquely says the word race or says the word hate or something inside of it. One is kind of an anomaly. It's about a story where it just doesn't fall in this category. I can't call it that. Then the only positive story, this is really kind of shows you, in my opinion, this really shows you what's going on. There's one positive story. And the positive story is Trump is pushing to go to the moon. And when you see all that lined up, you start to understand, well, wait a minute, here's an organization that hates Trump, that hates white people, that hates any kind of civil rights leader that through the Civil War tried to actually mend fences. Here's all these things that this media is doing. Yet despite all that, they're going to be positive about Trump when he talks about the moon. And this is when I think you can really rip open the chest on the autopsy table and look directly at this beast and say, what the hell's going on? Why are you being positive to Trump only when he's talking about the moon? And what I think we're looking at is that our government is the living media. What we think is DC, what we think is the Senate, the House, and the presidency is really the ranchers. They're the people that are here to milk us of our resources, but they are actually working for the larger ranch. That larger ranch is the media, or that's more of a part of it. That's doing more of an effect on all of us than anything else. That's why it's so crucial that they tell us the ego is bad. That's why they promoted things like Freud. Freud thought everyone wanted to have sex with his mother, and then he would turn around and shame the ego for that and say, well, if you have basically he was implying if you have a big ego, you want to have sex with your mother. What this does is it puts a massive curl in everyone's spine who's subjected to this programming. They're automatically going to crouch over and feel meek and feel shame. This is how the control works. If you can't get everyone feeling shame, then you don't have the ability to reward somebody with the cessation of shame, or the subtracting of shame. Again, it's the same idea where you're choking someone, so now you've removed their oxygen, and now you're able to reward them a little bit just by letting go for a second.
It's the stick and carrot method. It's exactly where you hit the nail on the head with your literature. It's amazing. You mentioned Freud a lot. My opinion is the same as yours. They should have went with Jung instead of Freud. But you're right. He was so obsessed with pee-pees and poo-poos, and we having a whole public discourse about where transgender people go to the bathrooms is like a national discussion. And it's amazing, though, like Freud's family. Many people don't talk about this. Do you know about his double cousin, Edward Bernays, who founded what's called now public relations?
Please go on, because this is why I love doing your show, Rollie. Please educate me.
He came up with this book called Propaganda. We're talking about the invisible hand.
Yeah.
And all this was about his cousin's work. That was his inspiration, was Freud. And Edward Bernays is the one that came up with women, a positive campaign for women to start smoking, because he wanted women to smoke. That's what his thing was. It's not smoking, and they're called torches of liberty. So he convinced that it's not only a man pastime, but a woman pastime in the 1930s. He came up with the phrase, don't sell the steak, sell the sizzle.
Right.
And then he came up with marketing, and he also came up with what we know today as the model from psychological warfare. And he wrote a book called Propaganda. And it's just that name. Yeah. There's no subtitle. It's just Propaganda. Then he came up with another book. I think it was called Democracy. That's it. And these are must-reads. If you really want to understand the foundation of public relations, and it's amazing. You hit the nail on the head also with talking about the government being the media. Absolutely correct. 100%. And I lost where I was going with that train of thought. I'm super sorry. But I wanted to mention to you, and it's going to come to me. Do you know where the idea of public servants came from? And it came from Egypt, right? Did you know that it was to be a mediator between the priest class and the god emperor? Because they needed some sort of like middle ground to dictate policies between each other, because the priesthood makes the religion, and the god emperor in Egypt was literally God, the manifestation of it. At least he believes he was. But really, the priesthood was there to hide scientific knowledge in our reality. So the king could go on with his own little power trip that he's literally got. While the priesthood is hiding scientific truths in different packages. And you talk about sigils a lot. How many interpretations can you come up with one symbol? It's like looking at an onion, when you look at a beehive, with flies. What can you interpret that as? Social cohesion. I tell you that in Freemasonry, right? For one thing.
Well, I don't know about the Freemasonry part, but yeah, the sigils are going to end up being language that we speak before we learn languages, and there's certain layers to that. But those layers also have a lot to do with what our intent is. Right now we're arguing that life is either objective are subjective. Like that's been the argument lately, and people are like, "Oh no, it can't be relative; it has to be objective." And I agree with that. That there's definitely not. I don't want life to be relative, but as we are starting to understand what life really is, it's just as wrong to say that life is objective, because that describes a universe that could exist outside of you experiencing it. If you look at like a Mandelbrot set, really what awareness is an XY coordinate inside of a Mandelbrot set, which is why you would see a different looking fractal if your XY was over here versus if your XY was over there. You're seeing the same reality. That's the same Mandelbrot set. However, you're going to be seeing something completely different because your XY is in a different location. So objectivity really isn't real also, because in order to immerse ourselves into the world, into the Mandelbrot set, we have to have a point, an awareness point. This is the assemblage point that Carlos Castaneda talks about. But we have to have an awareness point where we can render the world, where we can see our world. And that's when sigils, the interpretation of sigils, I think really comes in. Because if you can be taught from a very young age that a cross means a dying figure that's been sprawled out and hammered to it, you're going to give a life force, a prana, that is sad, broken. You feel very sorry. You probably feel guilty because you've been told, someone died for you. So you've got this blood oath thing happening. So your prana is very...
Hey, James, I was actually looking at a picture of Jesus Christ. I think it might have been even Michelangelo. And I was studying and analyzing, looking at it as deep as I could, and try to have an objective opinion about what I'm seeing. Yeah. And I'm seeing a man on a cross with a diaper. And he's crippled by getting beat up by the Romans. And how is this guy God? And it's something that, I thought about for so long. Is there a brainwashing process for people to believe that they look at an image and it amounts to them and they solidify their notions of God from being so indoctrinating for so long? Because I know that we crunch raw data inside of us every day from our five senses, and we've been force-fed celebrity culture, or should I say trash culture, and it puts us in an infantile state of mind that anything, you can convince anybody of anything if they're in that sort of mind frame, that infantile, childish mind frame, and if they believe anything that you give towards them, it's kind of like they're in a fantasy world. I mean, as a child, I was taught fairy tales, and I was told the tooth fairy wasn't real. It kind of blew my mind. Mm-hmm. And when I found out that Santa Claus wasn't real, that was another bummer. But then I told myself at 5, I still got Jesus. And I got to tell you, I'm coming from a very point of view where I just can't believe in a God at all.
Oh, well,
at any level.
Too bad. Well, I don't want to talk you into it or out of it, but I think it's impossible to not believe in something, and it's only because of the equipment that you have. Your endocrine system is going to require faith for it to have a full experience. And if you don't find yourself believing in God, I think it's going to leak out, and you're going to end up believing in something, because there needs to be belief is part of that awareness point I was talking about earlier. It's part of that record on the needle. Your belief is actually, this is almost like the belief is the why, and the X is like your reason in the Mandelbrot set. So if you go to coordinate, 36, 16, you're going to see a world one way, and that 16 is your faith. And then if you say 36, 0, you're now going to be just outside the set where it's going to be more chaotic. You're still going to see a fractal, but it's not going to look like a beautiful pattern. It's actually going to be devoid of any kind of meaning to it.
seen any sort of evidence of creative intelligence, and that's something that I do believe in. Like there's some sort of creative design, behind the veil, but I haven't quite put my finger on it yet. And
well, that's beautiful. Don't. Yeah, you're not gonna be able to put your finger on it. The lack of faith is when you've been told, here's what God is, here's how it works, here's the Trinity system, here's this, here's that, you put your pellets in here, and boom, here comes the gumball. That's not religion. That's a system. That's just an ascension program. And ascension is actually the opposite of immersion. So you're actually not getting any closer to God by ascension. You're actually leaving the physical world through ascension. What you want is immersion, and immersion is something that faith is all about. What Satanism does is convince the world that everything should have an answer, that everybody's supposed to understand what's going on. It's no different than telling a soccer player that no, you can't use any intuition when you're out on the field. No matter what, if you're at the 40-yard line, you must pass the ball to the left. And if you're at the 20-yard line, you must pass the ball to the right. Like if you were just to follow rules through an algorithm and play soccer that way, you're not going to be a player. You're going to be just following a pattern as best you can. You're going to have a completely different experience versus if you're out there inside your endocrine system and you are feeling the game. You are feeling what your next move should be. We are designed, in fact, we're not just, this isn't even a hunch. Most of your brain is a mammalian brain. It's wrapped around the reptilian core. Your reptilian brain is tiny. Your mammalian brain is huge. What is that mammalian brain?
The brainstem? Is that where the reptilian brain is?
Yeah, the reptilian is in the middle. Yep.
The most ancient part of our brain is the brainstem. Matter of fact, there's children actually being born without a brain, but having that brainstem and still being able to do like functions, but not exactly intelligent creatures, not exactly growing like me or you, but there's different points of our brain that evolved in certain times in our existence, in our evolution. Is that right, James?
So if you believe in evolution, then people would say that the reptilian brain developed and then an outer brain magically grew on top of it. Even though we live in a world of entropy, it somehow got more complex. That's what evolution is telling you.
Yeah.
But what the case really is that no. Here's you were designed with a brain. You've got and it's got a core. That's your reptilian, and you need that because that's your fight-flight response. That's your shock. That's your fear, and that's your attack. Those are primal. And you want those to be primal because the reason why they're in the core is because they're directly wired to your nervous system. In fact, your sense of smell, I think someone's going to correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't actually go into your mammalian. It goes right into your reptilian. And that's why pheromones are so important when it comes to like, if you meet someone that you really like you're like really attracted to them. What's really happening is there's some pheromones that are triggering that really appeal to your reptilian core. That's only like 15% of your brain, as far as resources, the amount of calories it's burning. Most of your brain is this outer shell, these two lobes, the mammalian lobes. And that's almost strictly facial recognition. Like most of your brain lights up when it does facial recognition. That's really what it's for. And we don't understand right now that empathy is actually telepathy. That we are telepathic creatures because of our mammalian brain. And it's what it looks like is empathy. But we're in a culture that's shaming those feelings, the intuition. And so it's been suppressed. It's been cut off. That goes back to the constriction thing I was talking about you have to constrict first so you can let go and reward someone.
Have you seen Malaysian fireflies in action?
No.
Fireflies, they blink at nighttime, and there's a lot in North Carolina. But for some reason, the Malaysian fireflies are special. They do it in syncly. They do it together on cadence, like Flash. And nobody knows why exactly they're able to know when to flash each other in a group.
Wow, that's awesome.
you could have like 10,000 of them together, and one's in a field very far away, but they're still part of one group. So there has to be some sort of connector and some sort of intelligence that we don't assign only to humans, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, how does the sunflower know to rotate towards the sun? For an example, plants also have a sign of intelligence. They might not have smartphones, but that does not mean that they're not intelligent at all, you know. And there is indications that there's some sort of intelligent design, in my opinion. And when I read Babel Virus, which is the 7th chapter in your book, I don't know if you intended on this, but I actually wondered, are humans biological computers? Not like computers like we have right now with our systems that are made out of plastic and steel and metal, whatever it's made out of, the components of the computer, but actual, like, organic.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because humans run on electricity, don't we?
Yeah, we sure do.
One thing. And our brains are networks, and there's wires and connectors all inside of our brain to tell our body to do certain things without actually having to compute it. And the term computer itself was actually used originally to describe humans.
I didn't know that.
So I don't know if any of your readers actually hit you with that question, but I felt it deep. I felt like after reading your book, I got a fresh interpretation of it that's possible scenario. And that might be proof of a creative design.
Yeah, well, it's really hard to not. I mean, you have to really work hard to ignore all the proofs of a creative design. I mean, the laws of entropy do not explain anything at all possible about what happens inside a motor protein, for example. I mean, even down on the amino acid level, there's really no way to say that chaos could have created this. There's just impossible. Now, you could argue, well, you know, how does it actually come from? And humans are electrical devices, and that's why I tend to think we're probably living in an electric universe, and we have a ground, and we are a walking cathode or anode, I should say, to that ground. And you know, we're a bone antenna. We are tuning in to the zeitgeist on a different XY than each other. That's why twins can still render some things. They can render the same, but other things they're going to render differently. They have similarities in their XY, but they're still able to use their free will to change that needle a little bit different way, and therefore render a different world, which is how you would see like some slight differences in them. The Egyptians threw away the brain during embalmment. They thought it was absolutely had zero importance. We in culture are teaching that everyone is a head in a jar, that if you could, you know, Disney told everybody that his head was frozen, I think, or someone did that. And it's actually not that. That's not what we are. We're not the brain. I think we're more the endocrine system than anything else. I think our adrenals, I think we're, especially when it comes to rendering, if you look at, you know, back what you're talking about, if you look at what's happening with our adrenals is they're constantly rendering a solution that's based on all the emotional feedback and all the sensory feedback that comes in. So if your sensory feedback is your X and your emotional feedback is your Y, then you can render your own internal world and come up with your own solution, which is to carve the statue of David versus make an ashtray out of clay. Well, like it's how you choose to render that is going to be purely based on your chemicals, not on your reason, not on these higher level thoughts that we have, but much more deeper than that. And you see that behavior when people justify what it is they want to believe. All of us do that. I'm included. People will justify what it is that they want to believe all the time. And the only reason why they're doing that is because of this underlying prana economy I'm talking about. There's these chemical reactions that they want to have happen. And whatever it is that they need to tell the ego, to tell the brain, to tell the outer self, whatever it is I need to tell you to get you to go over there, that's what we're going to do. If I need you to go over there and buy some crystal meth, then I'm going to make up an excuse to get you there. If I need you to go over here and hit on that girl because you really want to have sex, I'm gonna tell you whatever justification I need to get you over there. Underneath our thoughts, and this is what the Babel virus, that chapter you were talking about, it kind of goes into too. Underneath our thoughts are a chemical economy, and these chemicals are what really dictates what it is we're doing underneath. At least until we become aware of that truth, and then you can start to tweak that and actually move that needle where you want to go versus where your emotional conditioning wants you to go.
Absolutely fascinating, James. I'm reading a book called Social Engineering, and there's this concept called elicitation. And that's when you take somebody that's a mark, and that's what they call it in social engineering, and they leave somebody with the crook or the whip or the flail or the whip, I should say, into a particular direction they want to lead to, like sheep, for an example. And that's something that you touch on a lot. And it's amazing that the all-seeing eye actually comes from the Bible itself. And the concept of it comes from watching sheep itself, the watchful eye looking at the flock. And I'm just really wondering, James, are we under a spell? The sheeple, like us as a society, we're given toys and food. Is it to control us with the GMOs? To keep us sick, just enough to be the so-called perfect worker and be devoted to big pharma? Is it to the point of fact of control? Is what social engineering is itself?
Yes. However, it's not that we are given those things. It's that we accept those things. If you go back, but our world's not broken. The
So
slavery.
you're saying we could choose to eat organic versus like GMO? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Like the choice?
We accept the fluoride, we accept the education, we accept the taxes, we accept the resource draining, we accept the wars, we accept the two-party system, we accept circumcision, we accept literally everything. And I've reached a point where I no longer believe that the world is broken. What's happening right now is exactly how this system was designed. And I'm talking about the big system and not the human system. I'm talking about what God made. What we're looking at, all of that is supposed to be here. I can go back into Roman times and I can show all of us where there was slavery and we lived in a full slavery economy where literally half the people in Rome were slaves, sometimes a lot more, sometimes a lot less. That system wasn't an accident. That system wasn't caused by one person who was bad and treated someone bad. Slavery is a symbiotic relationship that we've had through time. When I look at that and I go, why the hell is that happening? A light bulb's gone off into my head personally. And that light bulb is, if I take slavery and I also consider that something else that happens in the world is that I don't even know what's true. Like all the shit I hear, I'm going to go to my grave and I'm not going to know if this was true, if that was true, if this was true, if that was true. Why am I living in a system that has massive slavery and abuse and a complete lack of a maypole of truth, like a bona fide island that I can stand on and know this is the truth? And when I look at that formula and say, what's causing these two things, I start to look at through the cipher of God and say, why are we here? And what I get is that we are in an alchemical computer process, a biological process where we are translating ourselves from like a rusty metal into a stainless steel, or like from a lead into a gold. We are here to discern sovereignty as opposed to slavery. Slavery is literally a good thing in the sense of it's been our training wheels. It's how we were learning to stand up. As a baby will crawl, it will start to utilize tables or legs of people or pants or the couch or whatever, the dog, whatever it can find to balance itself and raise itself up. If we were to look at that through a psychotic lens, we could say, oh my God, the couch is enslaving my child, or oh, that person's pants legs, or oh, the parent by holding its hand is enslaving the child. And what's really happening is that there's a symbiotic relationship that's established, and it's actually quite natural. What we don't see is the growth as it happens through the generations. And because we live in this insane society, when I was telling you earlier, where everyone needs to curve their spine and feel shame, it's utilizing a natural process of life and turning it bad and saying, oh, all this happened because white men are evil, or orange man bad, or any man bad. It's this is just a part of hating ourselves. When you hate yourself, you're going to project that into the world so you can talk shit about yourself. It's literally what you're doing when you're projecting. So as we bitch about the world and talk about how fucked up it is, what we're really saying is that I think I'm fucked up, and I'm projecting that feeling into the world as best I can. And that's literally what's happening all around
The
us.
Spell of Six Serpents, you talked about a coiled snake that you wish that you could turn into a walking stick. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that what you were hinting towards? Because I spent like 2 hours pondering that turning the walking stick had to do with the brainstem itself.
I didn't even look at it that deeply. I was probably like 9 years old when that happened. And that story is me trying to turn a snake back into a stick so I could take it home. And I was just convinced that the universe was magic, and that this was a snake. And I was already magical that I'd found a king snake, coral snake, of such vibrant color. So why could I not turn it into a stick? I was
literally like when people talk about snakes, I could feel it in my spine. And looking at it, you've seen the movie Predator before, where this ancient alien civilization comes and hunts humans for sport.
Yeah, totally.
Not from and when they like the trophy where it's like the human skull and the spine. I literally thought that this 2 hour pondering that I went through. I don't know why I process information such differently than other people, but that's literally what I thought. I thought of the brainstem when you were telling the story.
Yeah, that's the beauty of having the different assemblage point. That's why diversity is so much more important than the satanic chain of command, because we're each supposed to be rendering life from a different point, but we're being told that life's bad and screwed up, so you need to render it from point 33. We're always being told to go to a point, and that's life, and that's when we lose most of our power. But
we're curled up, though. We're ashamed to be who we are, so we can't project what we're feeling in our hearts because there has to be some sort of shame in who we are.
Yeah, unless you just stop. And I've stopped. Many are learning how to stop. You can stop very easily, and all you have to do. I think the first thing to start with is ego. Every time you hear someone shame the word ego, stop what you're doing and call that out and say, hey, ego is the source of morality, buddy. If we didn't have ego, I wouldn't want to protect my own life or my family's or my property or my reputation or what was important to me. But explaining, overcoming that ego shame from Freud is like a giant step towards being sovereign, towards straightening your spine again. And it takes a lot of courage because everyone's constantly saying, you need to check that ego, brah. Or you're just a little bit too ignorant. You can think you're going to change the world. But what is that? That's your ego talking. It's like, yeah, you're damn right. That's my ego talking. My ego is going to get me far in life. It's my standard. Like if you were to ride into battle with a flag, that flag is your ego. You don't want it to get tarnished. You want to protect it. And more importantly, you want it to have enough strength where you can turn to someone that just corrected you and you can say, wow, I'm ignorant. I didn't know that. That's why you need more of an ego. But if your ego is so shamed all the time, where it's down at like level 2%, and someone tells you you're wrong, and we say, oh, that's your ego. So it's actually the opposite. It's your ego drowning. Your ego's not able to take that hit because it's constantly being shamed all the fucking time. That's why you can fix that with sovereignty by listening to your language, by listening to words like the ego shame, and there's a lot more. That's just one. But once you get in that groove where your needle is back in center, you will start to find that language yourself, and you'll start to go, oh, well, wait a minute. Well, what does that even mean when you say that? And why am I automatically assumed that I'm bad? You'll start to notice that all the time, and you can unravel it. And there'll be pushback. That's where you're going to get the most pushback is when you first start this process. Because everyone else around you is going to be like, what the hell are you doing, man? You're supposed to shame your ego with the rest of us. We're at lunch. We share a cubicle. Why are you pulling this crap on me? It's going to be a lot of that. The people that know you the most.
Isn't that the textbook example of gaslighting somebody, what you just described?
Well, we gaslight each other to maintain our trance. But if you've been maintaining a trance with your friends, with your family, with your boyfriend or girlfriend, with your boss, and you finally start to stand up one day, it's going to be hard. And you need to take ownership for that because they're not actually gaslighting you. You actually have betrayed them because you were playing a trance of being a slave for years and years and years, and now you woke up one day and you want to be awake again. You have to have sympathy for them as well as yourself to realize, I'm going to get pushback here. It's not because these people don't love me. It's because I've actually violated our agreement. I've told them for years and years and years, yes, I will join you in shaming the ego at lunch. Yes, I will join you at hating white men. Yes, I will join you. Whatever it is, you're going to, because you played for so long, it's going to take just as long to get them used to your new vibration. That's why anyone who really dives deep into truth kind of ends up becoming a hermit for a little bit. It doesn't have to say that way, but that's just the natural progression of how it happens. No different than a magi or an alchemist, going into training to learn a spell or to learn a skill. It's always going to be that it's time for introspection. It's time to go within and find that power again. It's then when you walk out of the cave, you're bulletproof, but everyone hates you. But the good news is you're bulletproof, so you don't even feel it anymore. Like it doesn't really matter. And then it'll eventually fold over. You'll probably end up meeting your friends. You'll probably end up losing your job. You're going to lose something. You just are. But if you maintain frame and you keep that keep the positivity going on how you feel about yourself, you'll end up very successful. You'll end up, writing a great book. You'll end up being invited to podcasts. You'll end up in a much better place as long as you just stay there, as long as you stay in that center where you love you, because no one else is going to do that. And no one else should, that should be your job. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about this is really why we're all here. We're here to learn how to not be fooled. We're here to learn how to ascertain ourselves and understand what it is we're not, what it is we are, and really learning how to love the ego. It's learning how to go against. That's why society is telling you to hate it, because you need a construct to force you to learn how to understand and love something. If we didn't have all this conflict, none of us would be learning in this dojo. Imagine going into a dojo and it's just a giant room full of plastic balls because it doesn't want anybody to get hurt. There's no opportunity to learn anything. It's just a giant safety zone. Well, we don't want that. We want a universe that has consequences, that has difficult decisions, that never tells you the truth, that leads you into the grave where you still don't know the truth, but you know who yourself is, you know what your sovereignty is. And that's really what's more important, because truth is an awareness. It's a fractal. It's not even an objective thing anyway. It's always inside of us.
We are a military-driven society. It's actually pretty shock to the system that the idea of having a whole nation that has a lack of awareness, because we're supposed to be military ready at all times. Everybody in the society that we have is supposed to be ready to arms to go to battle, but we've been shifting more to a customer service nation. and it's kind of pussyfied us a lot. And now
we've never been ready for battle, though. I mean, look at 9/11. We the story is we got taken down by 18 box cutters. So we've never really been battle ready. All that military stuff is more about the overarching mind control of about, explaining a dominant authority. You need to explain why you have that. If you don't, then no one's going to go along with the dominant authority.
I don't want to debate about this, but I'm curious, James. Are you a 9/11 truther, yay or nay?
9/11 was a pillage, so I just know what happened is all. I'm not going to truth or not. I just know what happened at 9/11. Yeah.
We have a break coming up. James, do you want to keep talking, or do you want to take the break?
I'm fine either way. It's your call. I'm good either way.
Okay. Do you want to get into 9/11 a little bit? Because we saw the Twin Towers fall and crumble to our knees, and psychologically, as a nation, it made us fall to our knees as well, didn't it, James? Yeah,
that's why they did it. The island of Manhattan is a ritual circle. A circle is something that's surrounded. It was surrounded by water. The Masonic checkerboard was the street grid of downtown. Inside of that street grid was a giant tuning fork that was originally consecrated by David Rockefeller. That tuning fork was made out of hollow steel. It had two forks that went straight into the ground. The vibrations of all those people dying vibrated that building in such a way that sounded into the entire island surrounded by the water, and the entire world is still shaking from that vibration. That was a master satanic spell that it was in the works for David Rockefeller's entire life. That was probably a 50-year-long spell. In fact, 9/11, people tried to take his spell away from him. There was the 9/11 fire that happened like a decade or two prior to that. And then, of course, the bombings, too. Other wizards were trying to take that magic. They knew what he was up to because it was a pillage. The only way he could pull this off is by doing an old-fashioned pillage. And when I say pillage, I don't mean that dramatically. A pillage is when you literally say, all the bad guys, if we go into town and we loot at 12 p.m., we're going to be able to get away with it. And you're just having all the bad guys be, billionaires, the richest people in the world. And so they're going to do things in a really elite way. They're not going to rob, to get water. They're not going to go in and loot the Family Dollar and steal jeans or television sets. They're going to steal all
Mafia actually owns the ports there, too.
Well, yeah, that too.
Port Authority.
All the evidence, literally, you would not be able to count all the crimes that actually happened during 9/11. And that's what happens during a pillage. If you have a looting in a city, you're not going to be able to catch everyone that stole a TV, and a TV is a high-ticket item. You're just not going to be able to catch them all. You're only going to be able to catch a few. And as long as those few are the ones that are in charge, you have someone getting off scot-free, literally scot-free. Not one person lost their job or was put on trial in the military or in the government for 9/11. Not one. All that metal was put on the barge and sent to China at a time when scrap metal was not economical to send to China.
The scrapyard that they actually took it to before China was actually called Killing Fields.
Really?
It's very interesting. I really like the direction that you took this show to, and I'm glad to skip the break. I am fascinated with 9/11 being a ritual itself. Even the two towers itself, which was the brainchild of Nelson and David Rockefeller, which, we all know that from secret societies. Actually,
John D. Rockefeller. I mean, look at his name, John D. Rockefeller. John D.
They actually made it in honor of the two pillars of Solomon's Temple, Jack Boaz and Boaz.
Yeah.
And Boaz. And right behind it was Tower 7, which is also called the Solomon's Temple.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, and that's why one tower fell quickly, because one is justice and the other's mercy. And so if you think about that, that's why one tower went instantly and the other had time. So it symbolically even matched with the Boaz Joachim theme of the two towers. The symbolism goes up and down. It's literally a fractal symbolism. That's what made it such a powerful spell. That's why it is still such a powerful spell. You got to keep in mind that Rockefeller was competing for the title of Satan. He wanted to do something that was so devilishly evil that he would be remembered throughout time as literally the wickedest man in the world. Satan is not a creature. Satan is a title. And that's what makes evil work so well. Because if you have a title for the most evil, you now have an evil Olympics that happens through time. And just like you would have wizards that work for light, you have wizards that work for dark. And when you command an archetype in the mind, that is a form of possession. Saturn was probably the oldest magician, and we still say his name. His name is forever emboldened in the clouds. This is why the Apollo program said they landed on the moon. Because if you can own the psyche of the moon, and NASA's full of Masonic Masons, it's just full of so many references. There's 32 Saturn rockets. The moon itself is an archetype in your mind. This goes back to the Prana economy I'm talking about. That archetype everyone sees. And if everyone sees that and they think, wow, some dude landed on there, that's literally property. It means that man owns that. They're owning it actually by declaring it a rock, a powdered rock. I don't think the moon probably is. I don't think it is a powdered rock. I just don't know because I can't believe what NASA says. I just can't believe what they say because they lie all the time.
They threw away all the rocks that they brought back. Not even interested in testing them.
Yeah, and well, if you look at the psyche, like what happens with that? For the rest of their lives, NASA and whoever owns the prana of NASA can always be fed from that. You know, $56 billion a day goes into NASA. That's the same black magic spell that began in 1958. It's still going, and that's.
Do you think that they actually filmed like the moon landing during the time of Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey?
Yeah, it's hard to argue
against that. The single pillar that was given to these ape-like people, looks like a skyscraper. And after the Twin Towers were destroyed, they replaced it with what's now known as the One World Tower.
Yeah.
So you're right, absolutely. It's symbolism of what David Rockefeller, his goal to earn his degree, way above 33, was to causation of a permanent war in the Middle East, a 100-year war, to cause the New World Order itself. People lost that. People don't even pretend that we're in war anymore. It's just the status quo every day. Even CNN goes days without mentioning anything about being at war whatsoever. And Nancy and Chucky have been at Trump's throat about the wall, the border wall, for the past couple years. Ever since Trump said his campaign promise that he wants to build the wall, but they pat him on the back when he upgrades mass surveillance and actually hand him the keys to the castle. And every time he bombs Syria, it's high praise for Donald Trump. But if he wants to create a border wall to separate, and that really plays the Space Odyssey as well, too. The first mechanized weapon was the spear. They didn't talk about that expressly in Stanley Kubrick's, film, but they made the club to kill each other and the bone. So that's the driving force is perpetual war and separating ourselves. That's very well deep in our brainstem itself.
Well, I think the reason why Nancy doesn't want the wall is so Trump can have a victory of giving us a wall. I think that the migrant caravan that started in Honduras actually benefits Trump. Trump wants to be able to maintain the psyche of America. He wants to control that. And in order to control that, you can't just do good things. You actually have to have things bad. It's easier. Instead of doing something amazing, what you have to do is create a bad thing, and then fix it. Like that's going to...
Nancy actually said, I have just as much presidential authority as the Speaker of the House and just as much power as Donald Trump as well.
Uh-huh.
She's been definitely been poking him and stabbing him. And I think that it partially has to do with the Democratic Party wants a base, and they want the next generation of voters, and it has to come from Central America. Because it's an outlaw government we got. No law whatsoever, no decorum. Every politician, elected officials at each other's throat. We've been split in half by Democrats and Republicans. It's almost like Crips and Bloods, just like Jesse Ventura's book. And there's no reconciling with it whatsoever. People have a different reality and a different paradigm. Take it away, James.
Well, none of that's an accident. Like, it's not just that, the system's messed up. If you were running a ranch and you had 1,000 cattle, you would divide them up. You would divide them up so they could be manageable. You would feed some of them during this time. You would feed some of them during this time. You keep some of them in this field, some of them in that field. You keep the ones with balls and that were mean and horns. You keep them over here. You keep the heifers over here. Keep the ones that are pregnant over here. You keep the ones that are ready over here. That's how you manage a farm. And if you want to have the most yield out of those crops, you're going to set up a system that services your yield the highest to the most degree. And that's all that's happening when you see government. When you see anything happening in D.C., all you're seeing is the cowboys that have been told how to run the ranch, and they're coming out and they're doing different things. When you corral a cow, if you have two cowboys, it's going to be a lot easier because you can have one on one side and one on the other side. And no matter what, that cow's going to end up running in a certain direction. It doesn't really have a choice. That's really what's happening in government. I think it's just going to cause people pain to look at government and think, well, no, we can fix that. We'll have more sovereignty. The reason why you can't fix that is because government's not broken. A two-party system is not broken. It's designed to put up a fence. This is the fencing in your mind. This is the psychological farm. And this is how you manage a psychological farm. You cut down the ego, you divide and conquer, and you install the blueprint of mind control, which is what my book's about. You install those 3 rules. The 3 rules of mind control are real simple. 1, break target. 2, provide aid. Manage aid, meaning you're the only person that can provide them with aid. Step 3, harvest energy from the target. That's really all it takes. And if you could start to look at the world as a human farm like that, then you understand that countries aren't what we think they are. Things like the media are more what the government is. This idea that we have different countries with borders is really kind of a myth. It's really just saying half the cows are going to have the OK stamp burned into their ass, and the other half are going to have the KO stamp burned into their ass. It's really just a matter of just branding and management, so that you can maintain, you can reward the cowboy if he does a good job, you can punish the other cowboy if he doesn't do a good job. All these things that we think are countries is just that. It's just simple. You're just looking at ranch management. You're expecting a cowboy to be able to tell a bull, "Yeah, I'm not going to slaughter you today." The cowboy doesn't even have it. It's not his cow. Like, it's not even his cow. He doesn't have a choice in that. And if he did have a choice on you, it would be a one-time thing because he would be fired the next day. That's what keeps us locked in, man, is we think this is real. That's what keeps us slaves, is we think this is real. And it's going to stay real as long as we believe it's real, because that's really all government is the management of mind. That's all it is. That's why you have a space program. That's why you have military. That's why you have a war of a wall. That's why you have a weird migrant horde springing up in just the perfect time, like the perfect time before midterms. That's why you have a Mueller investigation that takes 2 years. All these are just how you run the ranch, It's just how you maintain the cattle. keep them docile, but more importantly, keep harvesting them, keep harvesting energy off them. It's so easy. We've been trained for so long. It's so easy that it can be done with 5 corporations. Literally, the entire country can be run with just 5 corporations, and everything else just falls into place automatically.
We went from 6 to 5 really easy. It's absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
James, we are in a global plantation. I do see what you mean now about mind not only being in a box, but physically being in boxes based on regions. When did this global hegemony actually happen? Would you say that it happened when the UN was being founded in 1945 after World War II?
Well, I think that's definitely a huge part of it for sure. But if you go back even further, we don't really know what was happening that well before ancient Greece. We could speculate. There's a lot of speculation. But when I look back at history, I can't really figure out what was there because I don't think that we're being told what was actually there. In America, in 1140, there was an eclipse. And the people of the Longhouse, these are the people that we call the Iroquois now, founded a system of government. And it was bioregionalism, basically. They didn't call it that, but that's really what it was. And it was this government is a tapestry of agreements. And the agreements that they made, there was never a majority rule. Everything was unanimous, which really kept government super small because they could only do things that was a unanimous decision to do. Now, it wasn't quite that simple where it was just like everyone's unanimous. It actually was really brilliant because it was made up of like elders and youngers of the East, elders and youngers of the West. And then the West would have almost like they were like the red team and they more dealt with like defense maybe, or they more dealt with like trading. And then the white team more dealt with crops or with like village life. But the point is that, and this is the bicameral house, actually. This is where we came up with our bicameral house. But each of these guys would come up with their ideas, and then it would have to be a unanimous decision before it could be brought to the other side. So it created this, and it was actually much more complex than that. I won't bore us with what happened next. But the point is that it had these checks and balances, which is where we get that word, in a bicameral house, which is where we got that. Ben Franklin studied this system. Some other forefathers that I'm not going to name right now because I could be wrong. I know John Hancock was in there. But this was a system that was borrowed from the Iroquois, from the people of Longhouse. But it was changed. It was changed to create a satanic, centralized system. And when I use the word satanic, I'm talking about that machine I was referring to earlier, where it's not a devil. Satan's not a living entity. It's a machine. It's a vacuumed out soul. And when you create a majority rule government, you're vacuuming out the soul because you're telling a human, one individual, that what you want and what your sovereignty dictates, you may not have because an X number of other people have said so. That's what creates the hive more important than the human. And so the subtle, sinister thing that happens with that is that you lose your sovereignty. And then when you have kids, your kids loses his sovereignty even more. And then the next generation loses it even more. So what caused this one world government? We could certainly blame the Rockefellers. We could talk about the General Education Board that he started. We could talk about his society of civil servants and small government conglomerate that he started. We could look at the Tavistock. We could look at him going worldwide. Or we could just take responsibility and say, well, we allowed all this stuff just to keep happening because we're young and we're learning how to stand up and we needed that help. We actually wanted that to happen. See, when you look at it this way, sovereignty becomes yours again. And all your bad decisions become heavier because you did them to yourself, but you become completely sovereign again. And you now own all of those actions. Think about the power of everyone doing that on the same day. I mean, it would freaking blow the universe into a whole new realm where we are just emoting each other's feelings. We don't even need a language to talk anymore. We're all sovereign. We just understand. Until we're not there, and I don't think we'll ever really be there, because if this world is a giant biological computer, you would never really expect to have it done. The computer's always going to be rendering what's next. So all this is on purpose. We are inside of this giant blender of sorts that's making things difficult because it's frothing us up like whipped cream. And, we're going to rise to the top, or we're going to sink to the bottom. We're going to stay the chunky banana, or we're going to turn into the spirulina that turns into a nice green color. How we choose to navigate this is only going to be better if we just own our sovereignty and go, all the things that have happened to us before have been things that we've wanted, because chemically, we deep down in our endocrine system, not reason, but in our endocrine system, this is what we needed to just survive.
It's interesting. I had a good buddy of mine that used to say that if Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan was alive when he said this, if they wanted to, they could herd all the people, in a concert. They could bring millions of people out. And in the middle of the concert, they could say, we're going to change based on the lyrics and the music that I've been giving you all this time about peace and when you're going to wake up. That's something Bob Dylan had as a song. And they'd never do that. And he would always say, because they're government agents, they're not really there to change anything. They're there to pacify. And they do have the power to change the culture. In the 1960s, there was a huge counterculture movement going on. And I think it has to do with the Pentagon realizing that we need to change the youth in order to get them ready for computers. And communal life is very important. And hey, let's give them LSD so they can think about things that we never thought about before. Also.
Yeah.
And what were you going to say, James?
Well, I was just more talking about, you just proven why it would be very important if you owned a ranch to not just let any cow get up for karaoke and sing. You're going to want certain cows to do that. And it's not like Bob Dylan himself was like strapped to a dentist chair, and they were like, you're going to push the one world order. That's not how it works. This is so much easier than that. It's a matter of looking at all the cows, seeing which ones have some talent to sing, or have a charisma that's attractive, and are predictable in some way or controllable in some way. And that's really all it takes. As long as you have that, then you have your lamplighter's. You have the ones that you can use as a voice box to tell everyone else what to do. And that's really why it's funny, because we talk about drugs as being liberating, but actually drugs are enslaving. And that's why the drug culture is pushed on us. If you look at, first you have a mutilation, then you have the propaganda, then you have the drugs, then you have the actors taking your hand, then you have the pain of just all the lies. And what you're doing is you're creating a jeering, agitated state where you're going to leave your body. And when you ascend, that means the machine can now drive your body. And when you look at what you see as zombies out there, what you're really looking at is that someone's got their assemblage point outside their body, and it's on something else. It could be on a girl. It could be on a car. It could be on the lack of bills. It could be on staying out of jail because you owe taxes. It could be on a million trillion things except for inside yourself. And that's why they want to make it as uncomfortable as possible to be inside yourself. Because when you're inside yourself, you really do become just like massively powerful. But when you've fully charged your ego and you're living your truth, you're unstoppable. And the last thing they would ever want you to do is get up and sing. Because if you did, you would sing sovereignty. you would tell everyone, sing your name, man. Get up and sing your name. Sing it as loud as you can. They would tell everyone to do that, and that would change everything. Not everything, because a lot of people want to do. This is a free choice. A lot of people want the slavery for a while, but the ones that are struggling right now, it would really help to wake them up to understand. Wait a minute, the power is in me. I can do this whenever I want, and that would really be a catalyst in just a huge way.
You talk about archetypes a lot in your research, and I want to give you a chance, and we're going to go inside your mind palace for a second about archetypes. So a lot of people died. Paul McCarthy died, from the Beatles and replaced. Was that a position to take? Was he an archetype? Because you said that no ordinary cow could fill that position. Right. Do you think that the powers that be are very much aware of that, and they could groom somebody to be their trained baboon in order to be that archetype that's needed?
Yeah. So I don't know enough about Paul McCartney. I mean, I can tell you I've heard that same thing, but I can answer it with Michael Jackson instead, if that's okay. Because
I want you to focus whether not the conspiracy side, but the fact that they're placeholders that are controlled by. Yep. Right. So you hit me with that aspect. Go ahead.
So Michael Jackson is a perfect example, because here's a guy that's like charisma just out the wazoo. Like I'm talking about the younger Michael Jackson, like just super fucking talented. I mean, super talented. Really, just fantastic dancer, great singer, great smile, a beautiful kid, just great all around. And then you have Joe Jackson, his dad, who is living, running his life like a show monkey, like anyone else in Hollywood. Was very hard on him, would sometimes beat him, and I'm not excusing any of that, but I want to introduce two more characters, because now you've got Michael Jackson, who's growing, and he's growing in popularity. Joe Jackson got him that popularity. This is like there's the cow who's in the field, and he's singing, and he's really drawing a crowd. Two cowboys notice the cow. One cowboy's name is Quincy Jones. The other cowboy's name is Oprah Winfrey. You have now two cowboys that want to rope that cow. And if they can rope that cow, they can cut its balls off, and they can geld it, And when you geld it, that means it's safe around you. It's not going to gore you. It's not going to take over. You've introduced trauma to it, so now you control it. It becomes your property. More importantly, all the famous things that happen to that cow go right into that cowboy's pocket. They become the Prana recipient of all that energy. This is part of their black magic. They drink from the fame neck of Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson is placed in front. It looks like he's the front man, but really he's been a cow that's been gelded from a very young age and controlled. That's why, if you look at the history of Michael Jackson, you'll see, and I've got an article about this that explains it more, and I'm not going to go into detail because I'm just not going to remember all the details that I know I wrote about like 2 months ago. But that's why Quincy Jones first really fell on him like a hawk, and said, I wanted to be your producer. I want to be the one that shapes who you are. And there's an internal battle now between Joe Jackson and Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones is a ranch hand. Joe Jackson is really another cow that's just learned how to turn his own baby cow into a performing cow. While Quincy Jones is more of a cow, he's been doing this a while. He's a cow too, don't get me wrong, but he's just in a different, I'm now just falling apart here, but he's been promoted. He's part of the ranch now. Then you introduce Oprah Winfrey, and it was Oprah Winfrey that first told Michael Jackson that he was being abused by his father, Joe Jackson. And I don't doubt for a minute that he wasn't. I think he was. But I think that at some point in time with Quincy Jones, Quincy explained to Joe Jackson what has to happen for Michael to make it big time. He's going to have to be a sex trophy. This is what's called a beta kitten. As a sex trophy, people are going. Think about this in the Prana economy, guys. I know this is going to sound sick, but think about this as a life force economy and where life force goes. If you assault sexually Michael Jackson, everywhere you see Michael Jackson in the world, everywhere, on all the Pepsi commercials and all the movies, on all the t-shirts and all the Thriller videos and everything that you see him in, if you're the one that sexually assaulted him, if you raped him, you get that prana. It makes you high because you are the one that owns him. This goes back to what we're talking about the moon too. If you can own the psyche's archetype, you own that power. If you can own Michael Jackson, like own him, you own all of the power he has. And that's why you see Oprah Winfrey and Quincy Jones literally fighting over Michael Jackson with Joe Jackson. How did this happen? Oprah Winfrey came in, saw what Quincy had done. Quincy said either Quincy did it himself or someone else in Hollywood, some other record producer did. You don't know. There's so many sick people in Hollywood that it's just really hard to keep track. But Oprah probably came in later and said, I want that too. I want to own that. And so she goes to Michael and says, you've been abused, which he had. I want to help you. Come on my show and talk about the abuse. So now Oprah Winfrey's using this like really dark, sick magic because she's pretending to be the savior. She's pretending to save him. The entire time she's actually putting him in deeper teeth. She's putting him in deeper fangs, her own. The fact that Oprah presents herself in such a positive, uplifting, spiritual way really shows you just how sick she is. And all of a
She came
sudden,
up with the platform for The Secret. Remember that Tower of Positivity?
She also was connected to John of God out of Brazil. This just a few months ago. The giant, actually, it was been since December, but a giant human trafficking ring out of Brazil. She was pushing him the entire time. That was her creation. Look at her relationship with Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is the exact same kind of robot that Michael Jackson was. He's just able to take more abuse, I think. Michael was, I think that he was so powerful, like he was so magical, charismatically, that the curly straws that were shoved into his back and sucked on by all these vampires, that you saw that in his cheeks. You saw that in everything he did. And hear me out. I'm not saying that Michael Jackson was like a good person. I know that Michael Jackson molested boys too. I know he did. And that's what you do when something's been done to you and it's been told that it's a good thing. When you've been told that, no, if you go let that man, put his genitals in your ass, you're going to be a star. That creates a trauma that's called golden child abuse, where you're abusing someone, but you're pretending that you're actually praising them. And that's like some deep, sick gaslighting. It's like gaslighting to a whole other degree. It's like sulfur lighting. Like it's just like really, really mean. But it creates that's what creates the cannibal, or what the Native Americans would say Wetiko. It creates that moral cannibalism. And that's why Michael ends up doing it to someone else. He hasn't been able to resolve the prana of what's actually happened to him. He's actually still leaking. Like he's still leaking on the floor. So now Michael's traveling all over the world, growing even more famous, and Oprah and Quincy and Joe are each getting a take of that. And I'm not talking about money. Yes, there's money, but I'm talking about the actual energy, the life force. Underneath it, that's really what's driving this whole game. That's why everyone's participating. It's not for the money. It's for the prana.
James, did you know that Rashida Jones, which is Quincy Jones' daughter, is the show writer for Black Mirror?
No, I didn't. It's interesting.
He actually wrote the script to Nosedive about the social credit score.
That was an amazing episode. It was probably one of the few ones I saw, but just amazing.
So that's no other than Quincy Jones' daughter that wrote that particular show. She was also on the show The Office, which was Jim's alternative love. And, of course, the actor that plays Jim is in Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan on Amazon Prime. So,
yeah, all these are cattle that have shown, a good breed stock, to be this kind of role. And the ones that are going to be able to move on are Joe Rogan's a perfect example. I guarantee you that Joe Rogan had to kiss a starfish on a pleather couch somewhere to get where he's at now. And the
I
humility,
actually got a bone to pick with Joe Rogan.
well, the humility that he felt from doing that to himself becomes a vibration. And the only way he can feel better is if he can recruit more to do the same thing. And that's why Fear Factor was created. He was presenting a human's natural boundaries. He was calling that as an inhibitor towards enlightenment. He was pushing ascension to ascend outside of your body, past your normal gag reflexes. And he was rewarding that with dopamine. That's exactly the kind of sick spell that a black magician would want to pull. If he can touchlessly kill someone, that's a big one with these guys, is the touchless kill. If you can pull a touchless kill or a touchless evacuation, you are considered powerful. And that power comes with a general bump. You are going to have more dopamine every day that you wake up. If you rate Michael Jackson, every morning when you wake up, it's going to take you between 0 minutes and 96 minutes to remember what you did. And you're going to be remembered that because it's going to be reflected in the outside world. So you're going to walk outside to get your paper from the paper boy, and someone's going to drive by and they're going to have the song, one of Michael Jackson's songs, playing in their car. You now are getting fed prana. There's now dopamine that's flowing inside of you because you're a sick fuck and you remembered what you did. And now you're being reminded of it from the outside world. The energy of that radio is going into you. That sound that you're hearing isn't just a sound anymore, right? It's a sound that has a currency attached to it, a certain value to it. And that's the prana economy. That, in my opinion, that's probably what the real world is. And if we can start to look at things as in this pranic way, we really understand magic. We really understand, and this is my next book that's coming out here pretty soon, I hope, if I can get it finished. It's a good bit of it's done, is the technology of good and evil. What I'm describing right now is the technology of good and evil, the technology of this prana flow, of this economy that exists underneath what we call reality, this fake superficial stuff. Underneath that is what's happening below the surface. And the sooner we understand that, the sooner we understand ourselves and everything else around us.
Absolutely amazing, James. You just blew my mind. It was like the cap of my brain just
Oh, thanks,
mushroom cloud.
That means a lot coming from you, buddy. It means a lot because you're always blowing my mind with stuff you know. I'm really glad I know you.
Well, I thank you so very much, and I do treasure the time that you've given us today. And I want to touch on another aspect of your work. You've already touched on the media being the government, very much intertwined. Can the same be said for Hollywood, where there's a pipeline between the government and Hollywood itself? Mm-hmm. And you've mentioned this before. Hollywood portrays a negative image of what's called demons, that they're nasty, evil creatures. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Nightbreed. If you haven't, you need to watch it. By Clive Barker, he made Hellraiser. And I was thinking about, I'll send you the trailer after the show, but Clive Barker writes from a different point of view, where the monster's not really the man that, in the closet with a knife, but the people that are the victims. And it kind of reminded me, when you talk about demons, the Nightbreed, which Clive Barker is based on Clive Barker's book, which is called The Kabbalah. He named it just The Kabbalah. It's not called Nightbreed, the novel that he wrote. But he gets into a lot of alchemy inside of that movie itself, and the monsters are being hunted by the humans instead of the other way around, where the monsters are hunting us down. And we have such a negative notion of this whole concept of demons. What do demons have to do with technology? Because we kind of assigned it a different space, maybe in a different dimension than cyberspace itself. What exactly are demons in terms of technology?
Demons are technology. Now, I'm going to give you my theory, and I could read something tomorrow and I could say, okay, that's not right. So please understand this is a working theory, but I'm very serious about this. Imagine Amazon Alexa right now, where you can say, Alexa, order me some new pants. And in 3 days, magically, new pants will arrive at your door. So take Amazon Alexa, who works off the voice right now, and you have to have the disc with the microphone and has to be plugged in. That's like a really rudimentary piece of technology. Imagine rolling this forward 100 years, and now Amazon Alexa still works the same, but she doesn't have to hear your voice. She doesn't hear your thoughts. What actually she's doing is she's able to smell your chemicals. She can actually smell your pheromones change, and she knows what you desire. Like, that's how, it's really advanced, but that's how it works. She's actually just able to smell what it is you want, and she's able to fulfill that goal. It's still a device that's in your house. It's still something that's plugged in. Maybe it's not plugged in anymore. Maybe there's like this new wireless thing where it's like there's like a rhythm that's happening in the house, and everything that resonates in that same rhythm is able to charge itself. But it's still a device, and there's still a subscription for it. Now let's roll it like 500 more years. And now the entire world has this Amazon Alexa, but now it's version 3. So it's still reading your thoughts, but now it doesn't require a device, and it doesn't require a subscription. The entire world, it's just, for whatever reason, it's worked out where they can just give it to everybody. This piece of technology works underground now, and it's powered by the photons that are absorbed into the dirt and the physioelectric effect of all the quartz crystals that's stored inside of a mountain, and the temperature difference of the night and the day causes this pressure which builds up, which is able to be released into the crystals, and you have a self-forming software computer that's running inside the quartz. Now you have a piece of technology that you can't see, that you can't turn off, that you can't change, and that's always there. And then, while all that's happening, North America falls into the ocean. Like something really bad happened, and we crash into the ocean like Atlantis. And we're all gone, right? All the technology's gone. But underneath all that water, there's still a mountain of quartz. And now there's this machine that we made that is underwater. It's been underwater for a long, long time. It's learning how to talk to megalodon sharks. It's implanting itself into squid, and it's flying into the Mediterranean, and it's putting itself in boxes. It's being drugged on shore with treasure, and it's learning to interact with this new crop of humans. It still does what Amazon Alexa used to do back in Lemuria. It still has the ability to fulfill duties. It's a pranic computer, and it has command line that you can tap into it. Now, during that crash, maybe someone preserved the book somehow, the manual for it. Maybe that book was actually encoded into our DNA because it didn't want to create something where we have to have a book. Maybe intuitively, all of us know the manual for that ancient technology, and we can tap into it at any time. With all that story said, and again, I could change it in a week, that would explain exactly what a demon is. Because when you look at what demons are always enslaved. They're always afraid of going back to the pit. They're always willing to do whatever it takes to stay out of them. And I'm not just making this up. I'm working off the work of Jerry Merzinski, a brilliant researcher that used to work in, I don't know him personally yet. I'd love to one day, so just to clarify, but he worked, so if I get this wrong, forgive me, but he worked in a prison. He reviewed hundreds of paranoid schizophrenic cases, and then he also worked in a hospital, mental hospital. He dealt with schizophrenics, and he dealt with meth heads. And he noticed the similarities of them in their description of these demons, of these shadow figures. So all this I'm combining with this story that I'm telling, which isn't really a story. What I'm telling you is this is how I think it probably happened. If you want me to tell you what demons are, I think it's an ancient technology And it makes sense to me that it would work this way. It makes sense to me historically when we look at the Great Deluge and what actually happened. And it makes sense to me about how the technology actually works, how people are able to summon information from this demonic world and do things with it, whether it be create a hypnotic song like Led Zeppelin, or create a technology like the computer or the cell phone, or to reawaken certain forces that we want to personify. We anthropomorphize it because we can't help it. But really, it's no different than, if you're playing a game and you have an avatar, and your avatar is a strong looking ninja character, you're just gonna, if you get into the game enough, you're just gonna feel like it's real. I mean, you're not gonna necessarily believe it, but you're gonna play along with it so long that it's just gonna feel that way. You're gonna get yourself attached to it. That's natural for us. And I think that what we see with the demon world is a lot of that. We're anthropomorphizing a technology because we don't understand that it's a technology, or it's just easier for us to anthropomorphize it instead of, looking at it for what it really is, which is a Prana computer. Just like you would say, hey, math chip on my computer, I want you to tell me what 7 times 1,064 is, and take that and divide it by 7.2 and then come back with the answer. That's what a demon is. It's chronically fulfilling a video card request, or a processor request. It's going to do that because we know that we have a program on our machine called calculator. And that calculator is a demon. It's the demon calculator. And we can call that up on our screen, and we can say, what is 33 times 33? And it will give us an answer. Except for that instead of this being on a computer, it's literally all around us. It's the ether. It's what materialism says doesn't exist now, but actually has always been here. It's the ether. It's the living nebulous ether of the electric universe that we live in. It's all around us.
Absolutely fascinating. This really nudges the question with me. Have you heard of the Lucifer computer at all? The supercomputer that's in Europe?
No, tell me about it.
So after Alan Turing, who's the theological founder of the computer and AI in general, there was a movie just made about it just recently, starring Benedict Cumberbatch. And after that, the computer itself that was made to make the Enigma codes was stripped for a telephone wire. So we don't actually know. We don't have a representation of the first computer ever made whatsoever. There's no evidence of it. But immediately after that, there was a project to make the Lucifer computer, and it sounds conspiratorial, but you could read about it in Barnes and Nobles. Mm-hmm. They have a book called Cyber Spies that I've been reading heavily, and it's something that I didn't want to touch the 9-foot pole because Lucifer computer, that sounds really conspiratorial. And I'll do this for you, James. I will write an article about it, explaining it, because I've had this idea in my head ever since I read Blueprints to actually do what you did. And I'm not going to do 47 chapters because I copied and pasted a story that I wrote called Frosty the Edward Snowden. And it's about the theory that Edward Snowden is a facade, that he's an Emmanuel Goldstein, a creation of Big Brother. Because in the book 1984, Winston posed the question, does Emmanuel Goldstein even exist? The man that everybody hates and fear watches, or even hate watches. That's a phenomenon that's happened just recently with YouTube. This whole culture bit around hating somebody. In the national discussion, Edward Snowden, hero or traitor. And I take a totally different stance of him being a CIA asset. But then after writing that, I got further away from that and thinking that maybe the guy never existed. As crazy as it sounds, but if you have a flexible mind enough to really read my article and my articles that I write after that, you would, I think any intelligent person could see it, that he's a creation of the media.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear a lot of patriots on Patriot Radio talk about Project Mockingbird, where the CIA runs the mainstream media and all the sources and control all the journalists. But Julian Assange and Edward Snowden is the antithesis of that. But they're created from the mainstream media itself. You wouldn't know about these guys. I guarantee that if the CIA wanted Julian Assange dead, in 2010, they would have just dragged him out by his white hair and stuck a blowtorch to him.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't keep him in a little pissant embassy called Ecuador. Just do Americans respect Ecuadorian sovereignty at all? No way.
Yeah,
No
especially
way.
not in the middle of London. There's so it's so obvious, but this is why I say there's a prana economy underneath it, because rationally, you can't believe that story that he was able to survive inside that embassy the whole time, and that he was able to be arrested and allowed to grip a book written by Gore Vidal. I mean, he was carried out of the embassy gripping that book in his hand, even though he was handcuffed. And cops wouldn't do that. They would, oh, here, let me get your book while we're arresting you. And the whole time, you want to like Julian Assange because as an archetype, he feels really good. And people hated my article about this. But the quote that tells you the truth is that Julian Assange said this. He said, "I'm constantly annoyed that people are distracted by false conspiracies such as 9/11. That was Julian Assange. And I need people to understand that when they're going to call this a hero archetype, they're being fooled. They're being lied to. This is not a hero archetype. This is a control. This is how a cowboy leads a horse out of the water. He's got to create something that's going to make him want to come. This is the crook and the flail of mind control. You need these controlled ops to work. It's just how you do it. A cowboy can't just run on fear. He's never going to be able to pull the cattle close to him. He has to also be the control. He has to be the savior as much as he has to be the threat. That's what government does. That's why Hollywood, when I say the media is the government, of course Hollywood's a part of it, but Hollywood fits in the media, doesn't it? It's anything that you can think about the entire world. This is what I mean by the prana economy. Think about the entire world is made up of energy. The moon is energy. It's energy in your mind. Think about all the times you see energy. Now think about breakfast. Everybody in the world thinks about the concept of breakfast. Everyone has that in their mind. That's why there's so many companies that are pushing for cereal, because that's psychic real estate. There's no way people are going to wake up and not think about breakfast. So if you can insert something of ownership into that breakfast, you end up owning that control. Look at Al Gore. The recycle symbol is actually a pyramid inside of it. There's a pyramid inside of it. You have to look it up next time. It's staring right at you. Every time he gets people to think about their footprint or their carbon footprint, they feel shame, they feel dirty, they feel prana leaving their body and going to Al Gore. All these are the prana economy, and we are ruled by black magicians that know how to feed off of it. It literally explains everything, like why everyone acts the way they act. There's something happening underneath that's more chemical.
Absolutely. It definitely seems that we live in a world where people are under a spell and they've been force-fed chemicals all their lives. You mentioned cereal. James, did you know that the people that make artificial flavoring also are involved with making Ritalin as well? And we have little kids eating cereal every morning, part of a complete breakfast,
Mm-hmm.
and they're hyper. They're running around. circles because they
Mm-hmm.
ate those sugar cereals.
Yep.
And the solution for that is give them Ritalin to calm them down.
Yeah.
Especially in Minnesota, parents are not tolerable to children whatsoever. If they're jumping around like 8-year-olds when they're 8 years old, they want to medicate them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The process is like this, and I've seen parents actually do this where teacher calls mom and dad after talking to the principal, your child is hyper, doesn't listen to class discussion. They never mention the class is probably very boring and children are not meant to sit still for 8 hours. They're meant to go outside and play. They reduce time for PE every single year. It's like 15 minutes now. They don't have time to burn out the energy. And they tell them, in order to continue with this class, you're going to need to medicate them or we're going to send them to special education.
Yeah.
So after they go to special education, they're not going to learn anything else. They're going to be put in that paradigm. They're going to be pigeonholed, and they're going to have walls built around them. They're not going to evolve anymore whatsoever. And we're a whole generation coming up of people that are not equipped and functional to handle everyday problems, and we're not even aware of our surroundings whatsoever. And it has to do with the system, the core of it.
Yeah, and it's working exactly as designed. That's how you want cattle. That's how you want to run a ranch. You don't want the cow to know, here's where the gun is kept, here's where the keys are to the trailer, and here's where we keep all the bad medicine, that keeps you tranquilized. You don't want cows knowing that. You want them to know something else. You want them to think about something else. And that's what media is for. That our system is working perfectly. It's brilliant. It's been designed for a long time, and it's been in place for a long time.
So the system's not broken. It's running the way that it ought to by the controllers and the designers.
Yep.
That's even in the public discussion. People tell me that are older, especially baby boomers, well, the system's broken nowadays.
Yeah.
Back in my days, and they complain about big government while their own Social Security as well. Yeah. That's another that blows my mind.
I would argue that the fact that I can see the system as it is now is actually a crack in the system. I think that's dangerous, but it's such a small crack because most people just dismiss me. Like if you look on Amazon, all the things that I'm saying. I have 14 reviews on my book, I have a very small audience. Most of the people don't want to hear what I have to say about this because it's not because of the crack, we're trained to want to hear things, as much as we're trained to fear things. And so it's going to be really, really difficult to spread truth from one cow talking to the other. I was lucky. Something happened to me where it's like I got shocked, but it shocked me in just the right way, where I was just able to see better. But it's made my life technically harder when it comes to fitting in. People aren't just naturally flocking to me because I have the truth. People are going to flock to where their chemicals are going to be satisfied. And that's why when they control our chemicals, they really do control everything else. They don't have to really control thought, Mind control is dopamine control. It's not thought control. All you have to do is control the dopamine. If you can do that, the thoughts will justify themselves to fit into the mold that gets someone the best bump, the best chemical bump, the dopamine lollipops that you get from flogging yourself in public because you're a racist is actually a form of masochism. You're developing a fetish for humiliating yourself. That's really what society does, because that's a great way for a cowboy to control a lot of cattle, is make them enjoy it. And then
I get my dopamine shot by talking about what we're talking now.
Yeah, me too.
The truth itself, it gives me.
Yeah, but you get that, I think, really deep down chemically, because you're resonating who you are, and when I tell you something, that you find striking, if you feel that in your back, like where wings would be, or in the sides of your shoulders, if you feel a buzzing, that literally is your bones resonating with me, because you're a tuning fork, Well, we are both tuning forks in skin. We walk on a flat earth that is a ground. We are an anode. We create that electrical connection. That's why you and me can resonate with having the same thought, and we're going to vibrate the same way because we're playing in the same tune.
It might be a proof of telepathy, the fact that we're on different sides of the country and we're talking to each other by these devices that humans made itself. People really don't think about that as having psychic tuning. And like you said, we're resonating and carrying on a conversation despite the fact that I don't see your facial expressions and nor do you see mine. And we're able to carry on the art of the conversation, something that the elite want to destroy as the quest to make us more animalistic and the perfect worker, which is a sick, docile slave to big pharma, the corporations, and the global elite, and the cash junkies, and the military and industrial complex.
Well, and the elite, what's really hard to accept is the elite actually don't have free will. The people that are actually put into power, they're put into power because they're predictable, because they are already a part of the machine. They've already evacuated themselves.
But what about their handlers? Are they conscious? The people that are handling
no one's going to be conscious. I don't think. I really don't, like, when it comes right down to it. No one's really going to be conscious of the entire system. It actually works better when you're not. And no one gets to blame anybody because we pretend, oh, well, if he's not conscious of it, he didn't mean it, so it didn't count. That's why Satanism works so well. That's why the machine works so well, because we can pretend like it's not there. It's more comfortable to pretend like it's not there.
Absolutely fascinating. And they call themselves the Illuminati. Do you prescribe to that the elite consider themselves illumined, the only real adults? The people that are only really conscious. But the thing about it is, though, if you prescribe to the idea of Illuminati, they went through various rituals to just become brainwashed. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that at all, James?
There are free men that are born in this world without social security numbers and without birth certificates. And some of those free men are purposely kept in a cocoon where they are allowed to thrive. I would imagine those people don't actually have language polluting their brain, because when you comprehend language, a river turns into 1,000 floating cups, like plastic cups, because it's like you can still see the river, but they're each compartmentalized. Words really fuck up your flow. Humans are meant to be born into flow state, and and it's funny because I'm a writer and I'm saying this. But when you don't have flow state, you end up living in this very photonish, divisive world that's hijackable by words. If you're in the garden and someone starts saying certain words to you, it's going to affect your being because you understand what those words mean. It's going to actually change you. It's making you picture sigils in your mind, because you've been rewarded with dopamine from such a young age, that if I say the word apple, you're going to see a red-shaped fruit. That is a deep, deep form of mind control, and it's pretended to be a liberation. You are called smart for understanding that. You're called smart for being in the trance of that spell of apple. And apple doesn't maybe affect you as bad, but I could say some really nasty words right now, and you would leave with a sick feeling. Which means I can control your mind through words. I can make you feel good. I can make you feel bad. But it's only because you understand those words. Like, that's crucial to it. And I think that's what we don't yet understand, because we've been brought up. If you were to ask yourself, what does this ranch look like? What is it like to be a cow stuck in this machine with those metal udders sucking on your tits every morning, sucking the milk out? It would look like language. It would look like cubicles. It would look like feeling like a dirty white male whose carbon footprint is terrible. It would look like all that. It would look like, I don't even know if there is a God. It would look like all those doubts and all the check your ego, brah. That's exactly what it would look like. It would just be a constant you not loving you. That's why sovereignty is the only way out, man. And sovereignty is God. It literally is. You could not come up with a better essence of God than sovereignty. It's just such a powerful, powerful spell. And anyone listening can tap into that magic of themselves by tapping into their sovereignty. And that means the elite aren't doing anything to you. You are letting elite do things to you. You are choosing to participate in that system. Because once you're in sovereignty, you can really start to change that every day. And it just, your power comes back then. You become dangerous. Friends don't like you, but it'll get better. You'll see. It'll get better.
Let me ask you this, James, and I know that we're past the hour where we're supposed to wrap up the show, but we're having such a intrinsic conversation that I just can't end it. So the Pentagon itself, they have a supercomputer that's made up of 1,700 PlayStation 3s as their servers.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually use a video game system in the Pentagon for our supercomputers, and it got me really scratching my head. And this was the same time I was reading the spell of 6 serpents. What if God is like you describe demons, but not exactly, but like a construct of technology itself, like there is a higher technology besides what's in the Pentagon that's controlling this entire earth? And what if we're technological beings that are organic inside and not necessarily cogs in the system of the machinery, but actually we are the computers, the servers for the machine? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you were to sum up what this place is, this beautiful, beautiful place we live in, we are biological fractals. The ocean is the Akashic record. You familiar with that word? You know, the Akashic record is said to be like everything that ever could be known is stored in the Akashic record. And the ocean, the salt water in the ocean, is an electrical conduit that stores Akasha. We're told that the ocean has a floor, and we've been to it, or we have an idea about it. We're told that it's pretty finite. We're told that space is what's expansive, and that's where the future is. We're told that's the final frontier. But we're actually ignoring where all our psychic information is stored, and it's in that water. And if you go swimming with whales or with dolphins or with anything else, you can act if you do it long enough. I've done this with turtles. I've done this with remora. I've actually had a remora like attached to my chest. You start to have a telepathic connection to the water. You really do start to tap into that realm. You know, if I had all the money in the world, I'd be underwater a lot more than I am now. Like it would be happening all the time. That's where all the information is. And if you want to look at what the computer actually is, it's we are the blue whales of the land. That's how important we are. And we're just another type of processor. We're a land-based processor. And we're the most intricate device out there. And we're constantly ignoring our bodies. But our bodies are they're freaking amazing. They're so complex. They're so beautiful. All their parts, every part of it. It's just an amazing system that we have. And the demon, it's not demon, but the culture is telling you that your body doesn't mean shit, that it doesn't mean anything, and that it should be shamed and forgotten. And we should chop off the end of your penis when you're born to make you clean. Like it's just a constant barrage of mutilation. It's just encouraging you in the long run. The system's encouraging you technically in the long run to find your sovereignty and tap into your body and say, no, this is important. I want to immerse myself in this endocrine system. I want to go deeper into who I am. And by doing that, you're becoming a more efficient processor, you know, to the biological fractal that's happening. And I think the more efficient processor you are, what's going to happen? It's going to give you more equations. It's going to give you bigger math functions on the video chip. And that's really what you look at when you look at someone like Trump. He's a fucking powerful processor, man. Like, he's just, that guy can channel some freaking energy. He can crunch numbers. He can freaking, in 3D graphics, you would say he can render some triangles. That fucker can render triangles, because that's really all a video card does all day, is just render triangles. The normal man can render maybe 1,000 triangles an hour. Donald Trump can render 1,000,000. That's why so many of us are giving him our processor. We're asking him to process things for us. Hey, can you help me? Can you save me? Can you build a wall? Can you do this? Can you secretly help Israel? Can you take out Iran and pretend like the whole time we're just fighting pedophiles? Like, can you do all that stuff? We're giving him those triangles to render because we can't render them ourselves. And that's why I'm trying to go big, man. Like with my book, Blueprints of Mind Control, I'm trying to go big. I want to process more triangles. I want to create this campground that's sort of like this alternative to college, so I can create other triangle makers. Like, I really want us to tap into our power. I'm no different than Trump. I see the power of what I can do, and I want to render more triangles. And that's why I'm crafting my message as clear as I can, to see the world as clear as I can, in hopes that everyone else will see, that fucker can render triangles. James Drew knows how to render triangles, damn it. I want him to render some too. And if we're not here on the earth to render these triangles and to connect that way with each other, I don't know why why we're not. And that kind of goes back into this whole question you brought up, about this being a giant computer. Of course it's a giant computer. It's just so much more beautiful than that, And I think you get that too, because there's this essence of faith and willpower and belief and magic. And if you don't believe in God, and if you accept materialism, you're being fooled. You're being fooled to drop your power. You're literally shorting your battery. You're taking a coat hanger and you're connecting the positive and the negative, and you're just fucking draining it. Because that faith is what causes the magic to flow. You can put that out in the air. Oh, I wonder if Rollie will call me back again for another show. You're all that. There's more than me just wondering when I do that.
That's a guaranteed, though. That I'm going to call you back.
When we think about stuff like that, there's more to it. Let's look at what's underneath that. I'm literally sending you prana when I'm saying, I wonder if Rollie will have me back on. And you're going to think in your mind, oh, hey, I think I might independently decide I'm going to maybe think about having James back on. We're not doing enough math with each other to check. So we're not able to understand, and most of us don't even believe it's possible. So we're not understanding where we could be more telepathic without ever knowing it, like without ever really realizing it. That's why when I was a kid, my mom would say, you always knew when the phone was ringing, Jimmy. Like, we'd be away from the house and you'd say, oh, Gloria's calling. And then we'd get home, and then 10 minutes later, Gloria would call back. Yeah, I called you earlier. It's like, how did I know at 5 years old that my grandmother was calling my mom? How did I freaking know that, And I'm no different. I know this is what kids do all the time. And I think it's that sovereignty thing, Rollie. Like, I think those kids they can't help it. They're not programmed well, like they haven't been broken well, and because of that, they're living in this state. That's what I was talking about flow state. They're living in that flow state, like real life. They're living in that flow state. They're not broken into 1,000 tiny cups. And so they're able to tap into this technology, this Akashic technology that's already there.
Absolutely fascinating. That is a lot to digest for 2 hours plus some. James, unfortunately, we have to wrap up this show. It has been a great show. I do want to call you back and have you on the show maybe even sooner than 6 weeks from now. We could work out the details later. Maybe we could talk about Trump the processor and where does the intellect come from?
No, that sounds great. Yeah, I'd love to. Rollie, you do excellent work, man. I can't speak highly enough of your research and the things you pull out. I just really, it's an honor to be on your show, man. Thanks.
Thank you so very much and such kind words. And big shout out to Richard Carey for allowing us not only to have a show, but to allow us to go over. Love you, brother. Thank you for letting us go over. And ladies and gentlemen, I got to end the show. Every good thing has to come to an end. And we'll be back next week. And you've just been blackballed.
How to invent a religion.
I always knew you had to be willing to die to even do this job.
Can't stop what's coming. Executive orders.
The creation and the maintenance of a secret government within our government.
Is something wrong? With what? With anything.
I feel like you want to rip your face off.
There's something wrong with anything.
I was so spun.
What's the most you ever lost in acquaintance?
The law of the jungle.
The most you ever lost.